Hello and welcome to Clash Course. My name is Joey Livingston and my co-host here with me is Greg Brahe. How are you doing, Greg?
Doing wonderful. Excited to enter. I thought before the show, somebody mentioned that it was going to be potentially Sean the Sean taking your place, and I was really excited to enter into a battle of wits with an armed opponent. But this will work.
All right. So this week, Greg and I are going to pick up on an argument that we commenced last week, which was on a particular statement made by, what was his name again?
Epicurus, or it's not Epicurus. I realize there is no I in his actual name, so it's Epicurus. I don't know how to say it. It's all right because that form of Greek isn't spoken anymore anyway.
So you
Not
just
sure
make up
anybody
a,
knows how to say it.
you can just make up a word.
Right. I'm gonna call him Frank. He's Frankie.
Okay.
Frankie the philosopher.
An armed opponent, you said.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what I follow it up with.
But before we get back to that quote, I just wanted to quickly address something that happened this week. I was originally going to give this show a different title, and I thought better later. What do you think of my decision, Greg?
I think that's probably a good idea.
All right. So a particular word was said several times in one of our forums. I allowed it to happen, and some people got very upset. I have since then apologized to that person. But the point of that moment was that just because somebody might be doing something wrong in your eyes doesn't mean that something good isn't happening for them and perhaps others. What do you think, Greg?
Well, first, I'd like to mea culpa there a little bit, that it was not just something that you allowed nor I allowed, but we both actually participated in it to some extent, and it caused some offense to an onlooker who voiced his concerns, which I applaud because as I'm constantly pushing, honesty and openness, especially when something upsets you, is the best way to handle a situation. But I think that realistically, I mean, this conversation, I'd like to couch it a little bit more in the philosophical sense of sort of a meta-analysis of the concept and leave that specific conversation behind because I think some emotions ran a little high in that one and the people
True.
got upset. So as far as the more general question at hand
True.
is it possible for something to be offensive to you and yet something good still to be happening from it? Am I understanding the question correctly there?
Yes, well, I mean, we can get even more specific and say, is it possible for somebody to be learning and growing in the middle of vulgarity?
Well, I think there's all kinds of ways to learn from vulgarity and to grow, but I'm assuming that we're talking about in a positive direction.
Yes.
Yes, I certainly do. And the context in this situation for any of the audience who didn't see it, this was a person who just the day before had spent a fair amount of time being very, very should I leave this one up to you and how to phrase that? Very staunch and
He knows. He knows that he
they,
overreacted, and it's fine. It's fine.
no,
We're
no. I
past it.
mean, not. I'm talking about the person who was participating primarily in the.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, he started the
it,
vulgarity. Yeah,
right, yeah, the person who started the vulgarity,
and
the
was
person that
the
we felt it was a good thing in general for him to be
99%
doing this.
contributor to the next hour of vulgarity. And then you were a close second, and I was third.
I'm not
Yes.
sure I
Yes.
agree with your count
Yeah.
there,
That's
but
true. It's true though.
did a
Yeah.
word count with it?
Yes, I did. I ran it through.
Oh,
I
oh,
ran it through Wikipedia.
this seems to be rather biased. I'd like
Yeah.
a second opinion.
I actually,
But
I actually never in that entire discourse, I never said the vulgar word in question except to nickname the culprit with the word.
Yeah, then you certainly did beat me, I guess, in that respect. Um, because I
I'm
did
not
use
saying
it
I
a
didn't
handful of
participate. I'm
times,
just
but
saying that
um,
that is true.
and the whole context here was double ententes, of course,
Yes.
words that have more than one meaning,
Right.
which was interesting. And the reason that we say that it was a growth or a potential growth experience was because the very same person engaging in this was just the day before very strongly engaged in a
Yes. A staunch theist.
right, a
Yes.
staunch theist and very, very firmly adhering to
Dogmatic
words
Christian.
having specific meaning, and yes, a very
Yeah.
dogmatic position. So it was a one nice to see him
Yeah.
implicitly recognizing the flexibility of language and the ways in which
Yes.
it can be used,
Loosening up.
and
Number
two,
two,
letting loose a bit.
fascinating. Fascinating. I was
Yes.
mesmerized.
You know, I always find some of the things, this is a bit of a tangent here, but some of the things that theists will latch onto to be fascinating. For example, I mean, this one was
Are
one
you about to be
particular double
racist
entente
against
that
me?
seemed
Are you about to be racist against me?
probably. Um, but that's is it because it's the Guido mustache or
No,
what?
because you're saying that that you're amazed that I found something fascinating, but you didn't use the word me. You used the word theists.
Actually, that I wasn't referring to you.
Oh,
Um,
I'm being sensitive.
but way to project yourself into that one there. Hi, my name is Ego. Have we met? Um, But what I was talking about was the things that theists tend to latch onto in different kinds of contexts and conversations. I find to be very interesting in that, for example, in this situation, it was a humor that sort of focused around one general terminology that it was pushed pretty far past the limits of
Yeah.
even like being cheeky and funny anymore. Well, you know, you can only make one
Honestly,
punch so many times.
my biggest criticism of that whole conversation, and you can fault me for it, but had nothing to do with the vulgarity and more to do with just simple principles of comedy. You don't tell the same joke over and over again for an hour and expect everybody to laugh at it.
Right, right. That's what I mean. Is the joke had run its course. But
Yeah,
the
the
flip
joke had
side of
run
it,
its
it's
course in the first 2 minutes.
I don't know if it was the same person. I think it was a different person actually. It was that this person had been asked to leave that conversation, but just the day before or 2 days before, we'd spent a fair amount of time, and this is what led into the inspiring honesty topic that we had last week. We were talking about the uh, risks of sexual behavior among homosexual men. And I found that to be particularly fascinating as well, because this particular theist spent an inordinate amount of time. I mean, hours, even potentially over several days, I don't remember exactly, focusing very, very specifically on the dangers of male to male anal intercourse. And to me, it went beyond the point of a an argument and more to the point of an obsession. And I don't know. I find some of these things a little bit. Sometimes the things that we focus on reveal more about us than about the things that we're focused on. I guess is what I'm going to leave that one as or
Yeah.
at.
I'd like to request that my crew pipe down. Can we do some piping in the downward direction? You're breaking my concentration. And not that it takes much to deal with this guy that I have here, but anyways. Um, was that a good insult, Greg?
I don't actually pay attention to you when you talk. Drift in and out.
So anyways, let's move on. I was you know, some would say that I was rude to the individual who overreacted, and I can accept that. And I deeply offended him, and I apologized, and we are now friends again. And the statement that we ended up agreeing on was that I am not perfect, and I was far from perfect that day. I'm far from perfect now. He is imperfect, and that we should move forward as imperfect people together.
I think that's a great statement. And realistically, when I looked at it, I'm not going to say that it was only him overreacting. As I mentioned before, I think that the emotions ran high in that one in general, and positions became defensive. And it was simply, I don't know if it was the forum, the time of night, any number of different factors may have been involved. But I think in general, it was just people reacting more from their more from their heart than taking a step back and looking at the situation rationally, and having a conversation that accepted their own positions, as well as granted the positions of their interlocutors, if I'll use that term.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the next topic. I wanted to briefly touch on something that I had thought about recently. You know, you and I wanted to have a conversation at some point, and I think we tried to, but failed abysmally, I think, on the way that you and I argue. Did we ever get into that much?
A little bit. That was right before I left for my pilgrimage to Jamaica.
Yeah, we kind of were all over the place that
sort
show.
of touched on it, but
you know, one thing that I was thinking about that I'm not sure that I said on that show is that often when I am, and I'm being very sincere now, I make a lot of jokes about racism when it comes to theism and atheism, because I think it's funny. But I do think that that when we talk to one another, when theists and atheists talk to one another, often we are arguing with the stereotype instead of the person. Would you say that's true?
in many situations, yes, and not even necessarily the general stereotype, but our personal prejudices and the we bring our past experience into every new experience that we
Right.
have. So,
Sometimes
for example, if I were to come into a situation with somebody who calls themselves a presuppositional apologist, it's immediately going to put me into a different way of wording things and stating things, and I will admittedly prejudge their position to an extent that I guess I don't fall into a trap. Would be where I
right.
go with that, and that's not necessarily the same thing that everybody approaches a situation like, and I think that's good and bad in its ways. So,
Right. I think that it can be challenging in any conversation to get to the person because on any subject, particularly subjects that you've talked about before with people, when you enter into another conversation, sometimes you assume that the other person is looking at things in the same way that you have in the past. I think that this is evident with you and I, and I'm not trying to pigeonhole you here, but often our conversations are frustrating for you, and I don't feel like it's because I have stop smirking. I don't feel like it's because
this is not fair. You can see me, I can't see you.
That's true.
Somebody turn his
we
monitor off.
need to fix that, but we need more bandwidth to fix it. So one day we will, and maybe soon. Maybe we now have kind of stabilized our connections, but you know, I don't feel like that frustration happens because I am somehow misleading you or deceiving you, but because you are assuming based upon your past conversations how I'm going to approach it because I say I'm a theist. Correct?
I actually would go a little bit in the other direction with that. I think that when we first started doing Clash Course, I was more prejudicial of your positions than I am now. Coming into it, not understanding fully the way that you think about some of these subjects when you're pressed. I mean, I've seen you talk about them in different ways, but generally, I don't see you defending or arguing for a position among other people, so much just discussing it. And it, I think, revealed a deeper level to the way that you think about these things, and it helped to overcome some of the preconceptions that I had coming into it for what I was sort of expecting you to say, or the approaches I was expecting you to take. So I think that now, after we've interacted more, I do my best to come into a situation without preconceptions about how you are
Right.
going to approach something or what you're
Yeah,
what you're
I
going to
think
say.
that you are saying what I was just trying to say. I don't. I'm not saying that you know it's always our conversations have always gone that way and will always go that way. I think that you and I are getting to know each other better. But I think in the past it has been, that when I say I believe I can prove in the existence of a conscious and willful creator, that as abstract as I tried to make that, you still thought that I was carrying a lot of maybe Christian baggage because I grew up Christian.
I think that we discussed this a little bit during that show about how we do shows as well. I think it was a little bit unfair because of the way that we couched or a little bit unfair for you to put that all on me. The way that we couched the topic was when we were discussing going into it was we said that we're going to talk about should people believe in a God, and then we proceeded to define God from there. And I
Right.
brought, I guess, in that situation, the preconceived notions that I had, or I guess more. I've just discussed this on my show before that as an atheist, I try to understand the nuances, but approach or I guess target the mean. I go for the largest and broadest definitions that are accepted. So, a conscious and willful creator, in my mind, I guess in that situation, was thinking more of a supernatural, something that it exists independent of
Right.
the universe and was
Right.
creating us from
But I didn't say
an
that,
outside perspective.
and I didn't say that,
Right,
and I
but
wasn't trying to be.
when
I
we
wasn't trying to be
discussed
tricky.
the going into the topic ahead of time, we just said, should people believe that there's a God?
Right.
And that was it was not until we had started it that we defined it as such. And I mean,
Yeah.
had we gone
Well,
into it saying should
that's
people
what
believe
made
there's
it
a
fun.
conscious and willful creator?
That's what made it
Right.
fun.
So
But that doesn't mean I was trying to trick you. But I think that here's what I'm trying to get at. Okay. What I have found in my own experience throughout my life and now, when speaking with your average Christian or theist, mostly Christians, and I'm not trying to be racist or believist or whatever you call it, but I'm just making an observation here, that their idea of an argument is to fix onto a single position and guarantee that they are right about that position. And they go into the argument, making that argument firmly and confidently based upon just their ideas, just what they've learned, what they've been told, and generally are not evidential, but they are just trying to push an idea forth. And the moment you start trying to break that idea down, they are going to somehow distract from what you're saying by just sort of kind of magically dismissing your argument. You know what I'm saying? By making
yes,
some sort of comment
I
like
think that the show that
something that Aaron
Christopher
Raw
Nolly just
did you
was-
watch the show
right.
with Aaron Raw?
I did. I just
Yeah.
caught the end of it. I was changing brakes on my car, my brother's car, before that. But
He made a statement that I thought really coined what Christians will often say when you make a compelling argument against their position. And that phrase was, well, that doesn't prove anything. They often say that.
that's true, and they'll also, as he pointed out, that I think in general it's the what was the word he used? How genuine they are, if they're being ingenuine. No, that wasn't the
Insincere.
word he used.
Insincere.
Sincere. That's it.
Yeah.
It's the sincerity of the question.
Right.
Because there's a difference between or asking a question with an ulterior motive and not having it. I mean, I will openly admit to doing this on a regular basis when I talk with anybody who discusses homosexuality as though it is a choice. And I will ask them outright, when did you choose to not be homosexual? And that was, or when did you choose to be heterosexual? When did you go, am I going to be attracted to men or women? I could go either way at this point, but I'm going to go for women, I think. Yeah, that seems like the better choice. And from there, you were just attracted. And I asked that question because it is a rhetorical question, and I'm using the Aristotelian definition of rhetoric there. I'm asking the question to make a point, and it has nothing. I don't care what they actually answer. I'm asking them to think about that
Right.
because I think that they've not even considered it. And
Yeah,
I think
but
that there's a
that
fair
even
deal
that
of
is different. Even that is different. There's a difference between asking somebody a question to try to make them think and asking somebody a question to corner them.
That's true.
And the difference is subtle, but I totally believe it's there because, you know, teachers will ask a class questions to make them think because they don't want to push an answer on them. And that is actually a gentle approach. Rather than saying, no, it's this way and that is just the way it is, you ask a question to make somebody's mind move. Whereas there's also an approach where you ask a question to try to expose somebody as a fool.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I think, well, and that's when we even use the term as a fool, we're really, I guess, opening up the conversation to a lot of, as I mentioned before, the presuppositional apologetics is that the goal of many of the questions is to try to make your opponent look foolish. And I think that it's a very disingenuous tactic for that respect.
When I was you know a believer in the inerrancy of the Bible, I used to have a lot of fun with Jehovah's Witnesses who did not believe that Jesus was God, and clearly most translations paint that picture, and so I would ask them all kinds of trick questions that would you know play those games with them, and it can be fun. And I don't deny that I probably still do that to this day. But there's a gentler approach, is what I'm saying.
You know, I have to say that I also have a lot of fun with asking some questions that are on. Have you ever, I think, sorry, I'm bouncing in my mind here a little bit, so not finishing sentences. I'm trying to remember who the guest was that brought up the quiz or the Easter challenge that was put together. Basically, the Easter challenge is tell me the Easter story. Tell me what happened on, you know, between what is it, Holy Thursday? I'm going by Catholic terms here, and Easter Sunday. That give me the chronology of events because it's an impossible question to answer. It's a great question to ask anybody who will tell you that the Bible is inerrant because there's multiple very blatant conflicting stories in there and parts of the chronology as in completely different days in which things occurred or numbers of people that were present or orders in which things happened and therefore there's several questions that are put together specifically based on that it's once again it can be useful in that, but I still think I'm aiding a little bit too much in the legitimate use of these questions and not. I have trouble even coming up with examples or thinking of questions that are designed to be unanswerable, gotcha sort of questions.
Right. So the point that I was trying to get at is that when you and I argue, and this has happened several times in my experience when arguing with atheists. In fact, Sean the Sean is one, and he will probably now be chomping at the bit to make a comment at me, not to me, at me. He's really disrespectful, right in the middle of the show, which is that when I come at an argument now, at least I don't know how long this has been the case, but at least now, I'm not fixed on a position. I am trying to explore an idea, and so when I look at an argument more like a cube, and the moment that I see that what I'm saying is stupid, instead of saying, oh well, then, like for example the existence of God, instead of saying, oh well, there must not be a God, I say, well, okay, but let's look at it from a different angle. And to some that might seem dishonest or tricky, but to me, I don't think it is. I'm just trying to say, okay, well, you're right about that, but you know, what if we look at it this way? What do you think about that?
Well, I certainly have noticed you doing that, and I think everybody does it to some extent. But I will make a small criticism of that in saying that I think the more genuine way to approach something like that is to state explicitly that you are going to approach a different angle and say, well, the direction I was going with this, I see the folly in, but there is an alternate thing that I'd like to explore. Mainly because it avoids the misperception of your discussion partner that you are attempting to equivocate or shift the goalposts or anything of that nature.
Now, wait, but to my knowledge, now I would love a specific example, but to my knowledge, what I'm talking about is when I make a statement like, well, you have a point there. Now, to me, that is honest. It is honest in saying, I grant what you're saying now. And if I continue, obviously I am continuing in spite of the fact that you have made a good point. Not to ignore, but to approach it in possibly a slightly different way.
See, and I guess that's one of those quirks of language, because generally when I say that somebody has a point there, it's often before I give a counterpoint, and it's my way of recognizing that yes, that is indeed a point that is poignant and worth considering, but that does not mean it is an unanswerable point. And in other situations, when there's something that I was simply
but isn't that because Greg? Isn't that because not just words, but statements can have many different meanings?
Sure.
Okay, so if I prove a point, there is semantic value in the point that I've proven, but that doesn't mean that my point completely disproves your point. And that's what you're saying, correct?
I guess I'm not fully following what you mean by that.
When I say something to you, for example, we already talked about the fact that when I told you I believe that there is at least compelling reason to believe in a conscious and willful creator, there was a lot that you brought in your mind to what I meant by that. So I made an entire statement, but it could mean 1,000 different things. And so if you make a compelling point, or if I make a compelling point to you and you say that's a good point, but what you're saying is you have some real meaning there, but let me see if I can bust it up with a different meaning or my point, my meaning, and we'll either narrow down what you're saying or we'll blow it out of the water altogether.
Yes, I think that's pretty accurate in general. Yeah.
Okay,
and I guess I mean to go back into that particular discussion. We've talked both about how I brought my preconceptions to the table, but I guess I don't know how to say this, but I think that there's a degree of expectation of what your opponent thinks you're going to be bringing to it as well. And if there's a way that you can then take an alternate approach, it is certainly a great rhetorical tactic to hit them off guard, basically, find something that they are not prepared for, which it certainly has a lot of power and use in doing that. But at the same time, it is also sort of exploiting a weakness instead of recognizing the inherent weakness of the. I don't. It's hard to say.
Yeah, let's keep talking about it for a moment, because I'm not sure that you and I are on the same page as to what I mean by flipping an idea around. Okay, when I began the argument about the existence of God, my concept was society, culture, evolution as a will and mind of its own. That was my idea from the beginning. I didn't lay it out for you at the beginning because that would have been boring. Okay, but along the way, and I would have to go back through and watch the whole show to get into details. Along the way, you made some excellent points, and I was trying to get to the finish line in this argument, but I hadn't voiced this argument over and over and over again. This was something that I thought about just a few weeks prior, and I thought it would make for an interesting discussion. So the mind works in terms, usually at least, it works in terms of imagery and relationships between these visual concepts, and then we translate them into words. Don't you think?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that is.
So when I
certainly
talk
true,
about
but
when I talk about the exploration of an idea, I'm not talking about a vague idea, the existence of God, and let me approach that 6 drastically different ways until I get to something that I didn't mean at the beginning. I'm talking about exploring an idea and having somebody who disagrees with you attack it at every point to see if you can continue to explore that idea in some not drastically different ways, but a little bit different ways. Or if every way that you could possibly think about it is going to be shattered. Does that make sense?
yes, but I also, I guess the point that I was getting at there is you said from the beginning you had intended to approach it in the direction of the societal, I guess, creator, or the collective consciousness that we agreed certainly does happen. And my contention on that one was that it seemed to be a bit of a bait and switch, because that is not a conventional definition or usage of the term God by any means. So when we discussed it, and it's not even a conventional, when people would say creator, it certainly is something that can fall within the realm of creator, by I guess if you explain it and explore it far enough. But I think that going into a topic like that, if you're intending to take an unconventional position, as much as yes, it can be boring, or not as interesting of a show, it also it or to open with the approach that you intend to take with it is, I think, more conducive to a mutual understanding of one another, instead of making it sort of come about throughout time.
Well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever explored the anatomy of a conscious and willful creator?
Is this a double entente again?
No. Have you ever dissected the body of a conscious and willful creator and studied his, her, or its anatomy?
I have never physically dissected the anatomy of a conscious willful creator, but certainly I have studied them.
Okay.
If we consider humans to be both conscious and willful and having the ability to create.
So if you had a discussion with somebody who said that they believed that they could demonstrate the existence of a conscious and willful creator, would you rather speak with somebody who was reading from a book of fairy tales, or from somebody who was trying to look at the thing which we both agree was somehow created?
I guess I'm not sure I understand the question on that one.
It's a simple choice. Most people who talk about a creator talk about him from the standpoint of a book that you regard to be fairy tales, correct?
Correct, yes.
All right. Now, when we spoke about it, I did not bring that book into the equation at all. I simply tried to look at that which was created, whether it be created by non-intelligence or intelligence. I simply tried to look at that creation, correct?
Yes, but I also think that to use the term that you were rather chagrined by, that Christopher Maudy brought in, I think that your usage of several of the terms there were allowably within the scope of the terminology, but rather idiosyncratic in their combination and their approach. In that, if you say to
idiosyncratic.
somebody, let's talk about the
Meaning,
existence
okay,
of God, and by God I mean a conscious and
I
willful creator.
I accept
So,
that my approach is uncommon. I accept that. Okay,
but
but
what I'm saying here is that the combination, we have to consider the juxtaposition. When we say we're going to talk about a God, and by God I mean conscious and willful creator. I think that it sort of sets the scope, and it's a form of priming. It's telling your, it's like, what are the garments that the Chinese wear made the worms spin it? What is that called? That material?
silk,
Silk. Yes. Okay. And what now do cows drink?
milk.
No, they drink water.
Oh, Greg, I'm so mad
That's
at you.
what I mean by the priming there, is
Yeah.
that we can lead our interlocutors into a frame of reference.
So let me
can-
see if I can try to understand where you're coming from a little bit better. Do you feel like I led you into a place to make a fool of you?
No, I don't think there was anything intentional about your actions in that. I don't think
Did
that
it
this
make
was
you? Did it make you
a
feel that
dirty,
way?
underhanded trick.
Did it make you feel
But-
that way? Did it? I'm not saying. I'm not asking you to say I felt like a fool. I'm asking you to. I'm asking you to tell me yes or no. Did you feel like, whether it be intentional or non-intentional by my part, that I led you to a place that you should not have been? That had you not been smarter, you would have looked like a fool.
That is a decent way of putting it. I think that what it was is that I entered into a conversation that was about a topic that was completely different than the topic I thought it was going to be about when I chose to enter into it.
Okay. Well, let me say that when I use the term conscious and willful creator, we had a discussion at the beginning, and I told you that I wanted to define what we meant by that, and I even revealed to you that I wanted to do that because I do not have a conventional view of God. And I was trying to break it down so that we could just look at the possible existence of a conscious and willful creator without bringing in the baggage of the Bible. And I think I even said that much. And I was just trying to explore it in a new way and seeing if you would come along with me and allow me to explain my whole idea. Now, I mean, maybe if I had just, stated in 5 words what I meant at the beginning, and I'm not even sure I could have, to be honest, because this was a new idea to me. I already told you this. I was brushing my teeth one day, and I just thought, I've been trying to look at God from the standpoint of the Bible this whole time. What happens if I just completely throw that out? And it was just one idea that I saw, and I thought it would be interesting to take that journey on our show. But it wasn't my intention for you to be for me to make you into a court jester. I was hoping.
And as
that,
I said,
that
I did not feel at any point that there was any intention on your side behind it. But I feel the thing that I did feel was that if I had the complete information going into it, as to what the actual point you were going to be pressing was going to be, I don't think that we would have had any contention. I mean, I've explicitly stated in plenty of the past interviews and on my show, or early ones with Bob, about how there's multiple ways that you can define God. And specifically, one of my favorite ones is when people say God is love. And I look at that and I think that they're, in that way, being a bit poetic generally. But if somebody wants to very explicitly commit to God is love and love is God, the two are absolute synonyms, and there is nothing more that I mean by God than I mean by love, well, sure, then that's a God that I believe in. I think that it's a strange way to use the word, and I would prefer to just stick with the word love because we have it, and it's more conventionally understood to mean that. But hey, if we want to, play some word games, then in that case, I'm happy to agree with you. And I think knowing that was the God you were trying to express before we went into the conversation, it would have been a very, very, very brief one, because I would have said,
okay. So
sure.
So we're running out of time here. I don't know if this has been a worthwhile discussion to have on the air, but hopefully somebody can take something from it. Let me ask you a question. We've come to this place to where, I understand what you're saying, that the conversation could have been a lot quicker. But let me ask you this. I believe that you're a very reasonable person, and I think that you think that of me as well, don't you?
For the most part. I mean, you're a theist, so there's something wrong. But
Stop it. So with that in mind, how can you and I have interesting debates on this show? How can we do it?
well, I think there's a couple of one is finding things that we genuinely do disagree with. On that one, I think that we agreed from the beginning, and we may not have necessarily understood that about the topic ahead of time. And I think that that certainly showed that as we progressed through it, is that we did not understand the level of agreement that we had about that particular
Yeah.
usage of the
See,
terminology. But
I have another argument about the existence of God. Entirely, well, maybe not entirely, but with a whole new set of ideas that may agree with what I last talked about, that I would like to talk with you about on the show. But I wish that I could talk with somebody who, was against the idea of theism in every way, because you apparently aren't. You are, I mean, you're open to semantic definitions, and by the way, the idea of Yahweh is nothing more than a semantic definition anyway. It's just, there's no way to possibly prove or demonstrate it. But I want to have that conversation with you, but I feel like I can't because it would just be so quick.
that might be possible. That you're right, but I really think you're overestimating my acceptance of theism. In that, I'm willing to accept semantic definitions only insofar as they are redefining things that actually do exist or can be empirically verified or are well-known general conceptual aspects of human life, such as love. And that I still think that if you wanted to actually argue that there is a compelling reason to believe that there is a supernatural, something that intentionally and willfully created the universe with a goal of humans being a product within this universe, and not saying that this was an unintentional or I guess part of the deterministic nature of the universe, is that of course when the laws of the universe were made, this omniscient deity was aware that humans would be made, but that the universe itself was created so that humans can live, and this creator wants humans to act in a certain way and to think about it in a certain way. That I would be more than happy to absolutely disagree.
Well, maybe if you put that in writing, because that was a little wordy, and I didn't keep up with every aspect of it.
That's it. Basically what I'm saying is I'm rewording the conscious and willful creator
Okay.
into the scope that I thought it was applying. A creator of the universe that consciously and willfully created it with the goal of humans. And we touched on, and you sort of.
I mean,
let this one go
I
and
think
said,
I
"Oh,
might
no."
be able to do that, but maybe if you could, maybe we can talk after the show and you can write it
work
down.
on writing that out.
Yeah. Also, I would like to have a discussion with you about the supernatural, because I have an argument for the supernatural. But again, I think that if I just laid it out for you at the beginning in 5 minutes, that you would agree with me. But again, what I would like is to be able to spend the time to lay out some thoughts, and even if you agree by the time I'm done, just to see if you can poke some holes in it. That's what I would like, and I would like to do the same for you.
I mean, it certainly would be worth the endeavor. The only thing that I question on that is that really clashing? I mean, this is Clash Course. Isn't that something that might be better for Inspiring Honesty or The Place? Isn't this? I look at this forum as a place in which we can find things that we disagree about and knowingly disagree
Yes,
about, or
but
at least
we
believe
we
that we disagree about.
fundamentally disagree about the idea of an intelligent creator, and I think that ultimately this discourse leads to specifically where we disagree, and that at some point it's going to break down to actual disagreement because if the semantics of our words can be verified, then either I'm going to be led to a place to where there is no concept of a conscious and willful creator that I can believe in, or you're going to concede that there is. And I believe that there are multiple ways to approach this, and multiple ways, I believe, in which I'm an atheist and you are a theist.
Yes, I think that you're right, and it would certainly break down at some point because, of course, there's reasons that we identify with these labels, and it may take a fair deal of time. And frankly, many of the theists within the New Covenant group are very, very frequently regarded by other theists to be atheists because your understanding of theism is so different and foreign to theirs, and frankly to the common ones, or those that are commonly, I guess, professed or understood in our culture, so that it may take some time for us to stumble upon the nuances in which we truly do draw the distinctions in why we choose these labels,
Right.
the atheist and theist labels.
Yep.
Is
Okay.
that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that I just think regardless of where we end up at the end of these arguments, that what is expected, aside from the other issues that we talk about, that when an atheist and a theist come together, people expect us to argue about the origins of the universe, and that if we can't disagree, if we can't argue the traditional arguments, because those are out the door. I'm not, I could do it for fun, but I don't believe in them. So let's really get down to what we both believe to be reasonable, and if we agree, we agree. If we don't, we don't. I mean, along that argument that I made about the existence of God or the existence of a conscious and willful creator, regardless of where you ended up at the end, you made some very compelling arguments that really caused some tension through the whole experience, and I thought it was a very exciting discussion. And and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, regardless of what you think that that I was trying to do or what it accomplished. I think it made for great TV.
I can't disagree. I think that the shows that we had, although they were not what I expected them to be, I think they were great conversations. And that's actually the concept that I had in many of the different I guess shows that we've tried to create and talk about, the Cult of Honesty, Inspiring Honesty, and the other ones that I've been part of putting together. I think that although Clash Course in a way represents things that are not necessarily what I had originally thought it might be, with
we do clash
head-to-head booms.
We do head-to-head boom.
It still is.
We may not hate each other, but we certainly clash along the way. Greg, we're out of time. We have less than a minute left. I think we should pick up on the argument that we started last week, because we were very much disagreeing, and so I think for that purpose we should continue it next week. But because of what I had committed to discuss to some extent or other on the show, I thought it would be better to break it up with some different topics. So should we continue next week?
Yes, I would love to. And just as a quick recap on that one, we had left off discussing the very specific portion of the quote, is that discussing the problem of evil. Is God able but not willing to prevent evil? Then he is malevolent. Was the end point of that show. So I look forward to getting started back on that topic again.
Okay. We'll see you next week on Clash Course.